have today now our last speaker. It is Will Raynolds, who is the Director of Heritage Conservation Program at the J.M. Kaplan Fund in New York. As we heard earlier, the Kaplan Fund already funded the storage of Nimrud, and Will was personally at site so that they continued the support of the recovery project at Nimrud. And the Kaplan is a family foundation that is supporting over 75 years preservation of heritage in Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Sudan, and Afghanistan. So we are very happy to have also their support for this webinar and an upcoming strategy plan dialogue for the future of Nimrud, also supported by the Kaplan Fund. Please, Will, if you would like to take the mic.
All right, well, thank you, Lana. Thank you for your kind introduction. Thank you to Tari for hosting this discussion. And as you mentioned, we certainly hope that this conversation will continue in the coming months as planning for the site recovery goes hand in hand with the ongoing works. I wanted to share just a few brief remarks on behalf of our board of directors to give you some insight as to why Kaplan has been supporting the work at Nimrud and why it is that we think there's a reasonable hope that other similar institutions, private and public foundations around the world might support the ongoing needs on site. It's very clear from everything that we've heard today that remarkable things are possible right now in Nimrud. And we've seen that in the work of the teams on site, both to recover the elements that were destroyed by Daesh, as well as to conduct ongoing research and make new discoveries, clarifying features on site that have long been neglected. And that's very encouraging. But I think the fundamental impression of a visitor on site at Nimrud right now, and I'll just share, some perspective, as Lana mentioned, with the support of the state board and Tari. I recently had a chance to travel to Nimrud with members of our board of directors, and I think the fundamental impression is one that it feels that the level of destruction is so severe that recovery can feel impossible. And that initial impression can only be countered, honestly, by encountering the hard work and the tangible results that teams in the field are producing right now. So when members of our group ask that question, moments from stepping out of the bus and taking in an immediate gut sense of the magnitude of damage, how is it even possible to bring some sense of the site back, one might reasonably ask? The answer, which was quite compelling and convincing, came in having the opportunity to speak to members of the team who were actively working to ensure a better day comes to the site. And that's right now an opportunity that very few people have. So I'll just say that as the planning continues over the next few months to imagine the broad phases of what recovery work still lies ahead at Nimrud, one point that I will just insist on is that it becomes very important in the not so distant future to ensure that Nimrud remains seen as a public resource in some fundamental way. It's been nearly a decade since the destruction occurred on site. And all of us here today are people who care about the site. Many of us have spent, long days, weeks, months, and years working on site to ensure its recovery. But many other people have unfortunately forgotten about the site entirely. It's been closed to the public, and with good reason. It's a sensitive place where there's been too much damage. It's an active archaeological site and active conservation site all at the same time. But I think any hope for ongoing support for the multiple phases and long years of work ahead rely on reconnecting the site to a broader public who see it as an asset worth protecting. And that's work that could come in multiple ways. But it's something where I think now is the time to begin to plan for that important piece too. One thing that Nimrud has that many sites do not is so much of its connection to the broader world has been through these architectural reliefs. And when visitors around the world in those 70 odd institutions that Lana was mentioning at the beginning of today's presentations, when they encounter those panels, they almost have an immediate sense that these are pieces of architecture rather than necessarily movable objects of art. And they, whether they're at the British Museum or one of the many other places around the world that have fewer panels, they still get a sense that these pieces of architecture came from a real site. That link between those what are now treated as objects in museum collections, that link between those panels and their site of origin remains uncommonly strong. And that is something that if we think about the tremendous collections that have come from many other Iraqi sites and now also are in collections around the world, those Nimrud reliefs remain impressively powerful in conveying a sense of real connection between a museum hall or a university collection and a site, hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers away. That means that there's a real prospect of re-engaging those institutions. And that's not an easy task. I mean, the list is long, more than 70, maybe 60, 70, somewhere around there. I was trying to get a good count earlier this afternoon and realized that it's a challenge just to get a count of just how many places have some piece of Nimrud right now. And that is, of course, a broad topic filled with active debate right now, as many institutions and sites grapple with this question of possibility for the future. Where is the rightful home of some of those elements? But I think right now, many of those institutions are likely to pick up the phone or answer the email when if they are engaged in a process of recovery, and if you are able to explain what phase of that process we are in now and where it is they might eventually come in and support that recovery. But it will be important in doing that work to maintain that sense of public connection. And I think for many of those museums and many of those universities that have a mandate for public education, somehow, in order to get them more engaged with recovery work at the site of Nimrud today, they'll need to understand immediately how the publics that they are speaking to and engaging and educating, how they will learn from that process of recovery as well. Finally, in today's great remarks, we got a glimpse of that potential for international engagement. But I think so much of the last 5 or 7 years of recovery work on site have benefited from a very strong and productive Iraqi-American partnership. And that has really started to build momentum and has taken us to where we are today. But I think as we look towards the future, a bilateral collaboration between institutions of two nations is probably not enough to take us all the way to where we'd like to be. I'll close my remarks there, but I thank Tari for hosting today's conversation. And of course, in the coming months, I hope that these conversations continue so that we can all look forward to a brighter day at Nimrud. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Will, for your final words here. And I think they are very, very important to create more dialogues with different institutions and museums.